we'll go ahead and get started. So that way I know time is crucial for everyone and important to everyone. So we want to make sure we give our presenters enough time and our attendees time to answer questions. Hi, everybody. I'm Kim Doherty with your president of the LIC. Thank you all for joining us today. We have a great presentation by Marty Festenstein and Jason Diaz with Nelson Worldwide. So before I get started in these introductions, I just want to cover a couple of housekeeping items. The webinar will be recorded and posted on ifmalic.org and our IFMA LIC YouTube channel. After the session, we'll be sending out handouts. We'll be sending out 2 white papers authored by Marty and some other folks, teammates on his team there at Nelson. So these will be posted as well on the ifmalic.org website and through IFMA Engaged. Once the presentation has started, we ask make sure that all attendees mute until the end of the presentation or during presentations if you have a quick question, but we will try to monitor our chat. So if you have questions and you want to put those in there, we'll be looking for those. So again, during the presentation, you could submit the questions in the chat section, or at the end if we'll do a Q&A. Thank you to IFMA headquarters for their support of the LIC, and to our component, one of our component liaisons, Anisha Hall, for all of her work in helping us. Thank you to our sponsors, Doc Solid, Rico, and DFS Green. They've been a vital part of us putting on the webinars and our happy hours, and we really appreciate their sponsorships for us. Upcoming events, we do have our next webinar is going to be May 25th with Wayne Wetzel, titled Alone in the Wilderness, Challenging the Future of FM. So we'll be looking forward to that. You'll be looking for the appointment for Wednesday, May 25th. If you haven't already received it, go look for that in your email. Okay, so here today with us to present is Marty Festenstein and Jason Diaz with Nelson Worldwide. Marty is the principal and chair in the corporate interior design and occupancy planning in the legal workplace practice at Nelson. Throughout his 30-year career, Marty's managed over 10 million square feet and over 300 legal workplace projects. He's authored numerous articles offering creative, forward-looking solutions for his law firm clients. He's participated in many webinars and podcasts offering the in-depth look at office space in 2021 now, and discussing the several design and wellness, well-being aspects for the future of our offices. Jason Diaz is the senior interior designer on Marty's team. Jason is with 18 years experience in a variety of project types with expertise in design of high performance corporate environments and the legal workplace. He's experienced in legal design efforts to set the project design vision while looking at opportunities to incorporate innovation, flexibility, sustainability, and branding. We are happy to have them with us today, and I will let you guys take it from there.
Thank you, Kim. On behalf of Nelson Worldwide, Jason and I wish to thank you for the opportunity and the privilege to share our perspectives and experience with the IFMA Legal Industry Council members on this post-COVID return to work spirit and thoughts of our clients and the industry. This ubiquitous stay-at-home order forced all of us to adopt rapid change to continue to serve our clients. As we all know, rapid change in the legal industry is not always synonymous. Remote work has been successful for many of us, yet wrought with challenges for many firms, especially rooted in the myths, if you will, of community, collaboration, the ability to cross-sell, and most consistently, the theme we're hearing by many equity partners across the country regarding the challenges and hardships of mentoring young attorneys during this time. We're learning that a hybrid mobility-focused future workplace for the legal industry might not be appropriate for every culture and every practice, and we'll share our thoughts on that momentarily. I do think what is important to note that well before March of 2020, the industry's interest in remote working was surfacing quickly, and spurred by exhaustive studies of card key access system histories for many firms. And in that, gaining an appreciation for not who was coming into the office every day, but who wasn't coming in to the office every day. In the next 40 minutes or less, Jason and I will share our thoughts with you on this hybrid model, this mobility approach to the workplace of the future. So in working with many clients, that the workplace design started before COVID-19, and depending on the nature of the clients we're working with, whether it was a singleton project or part of a ongoing master service agreement portfolio relationships, we know that the benefits of such an approach are rooted in a number of areas, and most specifically in the sheer ability to reduce the cost of occupancy and increase the profits per partner as a result of that reduced cost of this concept. In theory, it will result in less commute time and increased billable hours. In the criticalness of its ability to be supported by a ubiquitous technology approach is critical, both as a benefit and as a potential challenge. We're seeing evidence of both increased attorney engagement, but as we speak to the challenges, the concerns about decreased attorney engagement as the physicality of being in the office reduces. And what I consider and our team considers to be a potentially great benefit is the whole notion of having a policy for remote work and the impact that has on recruiting, especially in terms of people who have difficulty in striking the right balance between work life and home life. We've already seen our clients express the benefit of such an approach.
And leading into that, the recruitment and retention factor, that Marty mentioned, it's going to play a big role in moving forward for attracting new talent, retaining the talent that one has, because this is going to be a selling tool for many organizations that they offer such flexibility schedules.
Additional benefits of the hoteling strategy that might not be so obvious is the accommodation of specific needs of individual attorneys, practice groups, or industry-oriented groups within particular settings. What we're seeing is, in a hybrid model, the importance of being able to deliver various settings that accommodate different work modes. Creating two deliberate opportunities to reinforce the culture and the brand of the firm in the expression of the workplace. And lastly, but certainly not least, when you consider a hoteling strategy or a mobility strategy, accommodating that approach with other trends that provide for the ultimate flexibility, a single size office approach, for example, optimum flexibility is achieved. But two, a single size office approach is not for every culture and not for every practice. The challenges are as significant as the benefits. It should be obvious to this audience that perceptual issues are great, not only of the partners within the firm, but the perceptions of clients when a one-to-one model of attorney to office is under consideration. I mentioned earlier the potential decrease of attorney engagements as a result of such an approach. What is the need of facilities management, technology, IT support to such an approach? And what kind of factors have to be considered? How does this impact my need for privacy and confidentiality in supporting my clients' needs? Where are my personal effects going in such an approach? What is our competitors, what are our competitors doing, and what relevance does it have in the recruitment effort? What is the tolerance or appetite for change within our culture to embrace such an approach? And most importantly, who are the candidates for embracing such an approach within the professional and support staff of the law firm? So the reason this particular model is not in the same sequence as some of the other case studies that we'll be demonstrating or sharing with you is this concept of a hybrid approach was had well before March of 2020. This particular firm, in evaluating their real estate options, knew that across their 15-year lease term, that they were going to embrace a model that supported more a mobility strategy. So they already embraced a universal footprint for every single attorney, represented by both the lighter green and darker green single size offices on the perimeter and the darker green offices on the interior zone, two for revenue generating attorneys. But in the model that was had when the lease was executed before COVID, we had realized and designed in conjunction with the terms of right of first offers and right of first refusals over the lease term for expansion and contraction, the ability to reduce the space over time as a result of embracing a hybrid model. So the way that this was originally conceived is all offices of a lighter green nature were at a 1-to-1 ratio of equity partner to office. Everything of a darker green nature was at a 1-to-2 ratio for everyone after the equity partner level, including income partners, associates, attorneys of a contract nature, of counsel and lawyers never to be on a partner track. As a result of that, please note the increase of collaborative and communal space that is very much struck in the idea of providing choices and options when those who might not have an office dedicated 100% of the time to them are in the office. Yet at any point in time, should they need that privacy, that four walls and a door, by integrating IWMS technology, integrated workplace management system technology, they can advise the facilities team and IT team and coordinate accordingly what office I will have for that hour, for that day, for that 3 days. Note also that the increase of red and pink spaces on the floor plate is had too with the nature of the work to be done that day for people. So it might be continuing education, it might be team meetings of a Zoom nature, it might be preparing for trial. The personal effects for these individuals not dedicated to one-to-one are had in the gray zones distributed around the floor plate. Those gray zones are had with a seriously reduced footprint of paper, but at the same time, had in a way that should you need that physical file or those personal effects, they are rolled to the respective office or footprint or location you'll be needing for that time. What this resulted in was the ability to, over time, reduce the overall footprint by a potential another 60,000 square feet over 190,000 square foot stack or floor plate over the term. They have yet to exercise or execute on it. As you can appreciate, an initiative such as that, which I just explained, or what we're assisting our clients with doing now, has the ability to fail without the consideration of a number of factors. The commitment and the sponsorship of leadership, how the resources that are being created are focused on all to be impacted. What are the measurements or metrics that are going to be used to consider the return on the investment for such an approach? How are we integrating the change management process into the equation? Are we considering all generations at work, and are they being given the appropriate value in that process? And really a balanced approach to this strategy, this concept. So in looking at it truly from a ROI standpoint, and this is basically a little bit more detail associated with the previous slide, it's the awareness of all. It's is there interest in being a part of this? Am I being informed as to how it's going to impact me and my life and my ability to support my clients' needs? And what will the sense of normalcy, if you will, in a change management approach require in order to understand in advance of occupancy the management of expectations of such an approach? Our experience over the past 14 months and before COVID has deduced in some way that we're seeing a slightly different perspective from the AmLaw 50 versus the AmLaw 200 and beyond. And that is really most rooted in the impact of such an approach on the profits per partner metric. And from our perspective and from our dialogues with our clients, is 2, 3, 4 percentage points of the cost of occupancy against the overall revenue of the firm important enough to the culture or to the practice to consider such an approach? To make a blanket statement that this is characteristic of AmLaw 50 versus AmLaw 150 is naive and inappropriate, because we're seeing examples of some firms at the AmLaw 150 level who feel it's not appropriate for their culture. It's just a perspective with some degree of commonality that we are seeing over the past 14 months in this equation.
And one thing to note that not all aspects of a mobility implementation need to happen for every organization. There are pieces and components that can be applied without having to shift the overall dynamic of any one organization. So there are bits and pieces that can be borrowed or assimilated in to maybe ease the function of things without having to do a massive overhaul.
So needless to say that our work life has been seriously disrupted, but as we are close to 50% of the population of our country being vaccinated, and things in terms of restrictions start to ease, business as usual is getting a little bit easier, but we don't believe it'll ever be business as usual again. This global experiment has resulted in the ability to be successful in a much more mobile climate. The boundaries of physical presence are changing. The trends and expectations are changing. The role the office will play is changing. The ability to be successful working from home. We firmly believe in our culture that workplace must evolve, which is why the importance, when you're signing a longer lease term specifically, why the importance of the workplace's evolution, taking into consideration the need for flexibility. And Jason and I and our team define flexibility as the ability to impact the space with unforeseen change without huge capital investment being made into the workplace change or transformation. As a result of COVID-19, in April of 2020, Nelson created a brand new service offering to our clients called Spark, Space Planning Assessment in Response to COVID-19. It taught us a great deal, and we worked with our clients to establish their protocols and procedures and the crafting of those protocols and procedures with the appropriate issues associated with what all the federal government and local jurisdictions, the WHO, were suggesting relative to a whole myriad of issues associated with social distancing and hygiene protocols. That, coupled with a aggressive Nelson workplace survey and the survey work that we were helping craft and create on behalf of our corporate and law firm clients, too, taught us a great deal. And both of the outcomes of these various and sundry surveys taught us some very important information relative to both cultural issues and issues associated with the attributes associating with returning to work. In the cultural component, it was fascinating to understand and learn that the expectation of returning back to work was rooted in the fact that the workplace and its solution and the expectations of employees relative to the position of the firm, that it stood for something and stood for something meaningful, that it had the ability to foster my personal growth and development, that information is shared openly. And not surprising, the issues associated with workplace specific attributes were rooted in policy that supports the ability to work in a flexible mode, the cleaning protocols associated with the space, the flexibility to make my own decisions to return to the office in the context of the firm policies, and the reduced proximity to coworkers within the semi-permanent and more permanent workplace solution.
And one thing to note that through our Spark process, as well as learning what people were really honing in on in terms of importance to them, there are opportunities to enhance a space without overhaul of the physical architecture of any one space. So a simple example would be touchless faucets. Simple, they've been around for quite a long time, but just that replacement of a manual faucet to something that's less contact or contact free really starts to build on top of people's concerns and helps address this ease into the office again.
We our survey work resulted in some really thoughtful responses. And again, it was across all areas of workplace industry. Out of all the metrics that you're seeing here as a result of our survey work, the one that our legal workplace team specifically found most valuable and most intriguing is the almost 60% factor associated with the overall ability, the last metric on this slide, to move throughout the course of the space throughout the day and not necessarily be tethered to a particular environment, although there are factors of what an attorney and his or her team do throughout the course of the day that do require some degree of tethering, but the ability to make that a freer process and still be productive, get their work done, but not be limited to just my particular seat or office. Our team has the ability to regularly contribute to one of the most thoughtful annual surveys done to the legal vertical on an annual basis in this country. We are one of a handful of firms that, in addition to the 500 firms that are struck by this particular real estate advisory firm to the legal industry, to also contribute. And what I found most fascinating relative to the 7 years that this survey to the legal industry has resulted in is between 2017 and 2020 first or second quarter is the variable between the number of respondents indicating how attorneys that would work remotely in the context of their firm, an increase from 62% to 78%. I think the other thing that I found most fascinating, and this is why I'm sharing only 2 of a plethora of responses from the survey, is of the total respondents, approximately half anticipated that attorneys would work remotely in the next 5 years. And they plan to initiate some kind of hoteling strategy. But the other 50% indicated too, they anticipate the same, but keeping their offices dedicated to them 100% of the time. The other component I found fascinating was the second chart, or the second graph, and that is, to what degree does your firm anticipate a shrinkage of the overall real estate portfolio? Obviously, the perspective of a national firm, of which a third basically said, we don't anticipate any change, and the other 2/3 had varying degrees of 10 to 22%, which I think is even larger now, of what degree they thought the overall portfolio would reduce by. So I wanted to share a particular client that we work with on a national basis, who has provided us approval to share this with a much broader audience. And it was rooted in a strategy to reduce the 34 office national portfolio by a particular percentage point. It was a very aggressive model, a model that was rooted in how they work as attorneys, how they service their clients. The overall goal was to reduce their real estate spend by 50%, create as agile a solution as possible, embrace the whole notion of how attorneys work with alternative work schedules, and a prescription, if you will, of the new workplace environment being rooted in the various and sundry kinds of accommodations for this firm and how they work. And it's interesting that their portfolio ranges from 150,000 square feet to 15,000 square feet in all of these locations. But the nature of their work is such that attorneys are traveling to support national client needs with great regularity. So accommodation of all geographic locations for all attorneys was critical. In this particular model, which will be an example of the Las Vegas office of this firm that occupied in September of 2020, was to consider a very unorthodox approach to occupancy. a former very high-end retail mall, a block off of the main strip in Vegas, that was recasting its failing retail to accommodate the office requirement. Important to the managing partner and the management committee of the firm for this particular office was to provide amenities to their people within 50 to 100 yards that typically most law firms are not able to accommodate life. And an office approach that is rooted in easy accessibility and sanitation, because this project started while COVID had just been introduced to our society. Next slide, please. This is an example of the floor plate in Vegas. As you can see, there is a lot of variety relative to choices and options within the context of this particular office, designed to accommodate up to 60 to 65 attorneys in this square footage, which is rendering a square footage per attorney accommodation of less than 500 square feet per attorney. And you might say it's rather dense for the number of attorneys to be accommodated. And the vision of this particular managing partner was such that she wanted to seriously consider, even in a COVID environment, a free address approach to occupancy. It has been implemented in that way, even in COVID. And what has been the most successful for them is every evening, the office or workstation choices or other activity-based settings that are had within this footprint are vacated every night and cleaned and restruck or reoccupied again the next day. There's a very sophisticated IWMS system that allows the attorney remotely to understand who is occupying what office or what workstation during the course of the day, and their personal effects are also rolled from the depository, if you will, at the bottom of the plan, if you can identify that, Jason, to the respective locations by the facilities team. And this will be the model that will be continuing to be embraced throughout the course of the project. Because what I shared with you about where this particular physical development was originally had, we cut curtain wall into opaque walls that didn't exist in order to infiltrate this space with natural light. We created restrooms for this particular tenant that didn't exist in the previous expression of only retail tenants. I'll share some of the imagery of the space and how the landscape of Las Vegas, and I'm not talking about neon and nightlife, I'm talking about the physical landscape of the desert that helped influence the aesthetic articulation and expression of the space.
Another important factor to know, they wanted to, excuse me, offer their staff choice. So you have private offices, you have private phone rooms, open workstations, uh, collaboration seating with a view. Everybody has exposure to daylight. So it wasn't just moving to mobility. It was about giving people choice as well, which was very important for them on days where people wanted to be around the ambient noise of the office culture. You could reserve a workstation. Even so, Sherry, the managing partner here, is also adopting this, and she kind of shares a funny story that she was interviewing a young attorney to come over, and she's explaining their format of the office, and this person being interviewed asked, "Do you actually partake in this as well?" And she's like, "Yep, I sit right here in this open workstation," and so it kind of leads to that conversation that says, getting leadership on board to help implement some of these changes really goes a long way, and in turn, kind of contributes to their attraction of new attorneys.
So um, this particular law firm, again, a project that started pre-COVID, occupied in the last quarter of 2020, and restruck some of the thinking as we were about to begin construction, decided that going to a universal footprint and renovating versus relocating was the best way to approach their new occupancy. And I want to bring to your attention the lower right-hand corner zone that as a result of going to a four-floor stack to a two-floor stack, how this particular zone created once or three times on the remaining floors played a critical role in addressing remote working, but more importantly, no longer banking real estate for growth within this culture across multiple offices, and the executive committee's opinion about banking real estate for growth that oftentimes was never realized, but rent was being paid for. Next slide. So we created a whole series of studies that resulted in a beta test that was had before renovation and reconstruction was had. So in this zone, in that corner, a space of approximately 900 square feet, a little less, was typically had with the ability to accommodate 3 revenue generating attorneys at plus or minus at an equity partner level. That same space dedicated to 3 attorneys in the beta test was rethought in a whole series of different approaches. And I'm just showing you the one that they migrated to with both a plan and a axonometric drawing to demonstrate how this model could work. And so at the far left zone, if you'll point along with me, Jason, at the far left zone, it was a zone associated with the ability to access information from your laptop. In the center zone was a meeting space that wasn't technology dependent or even though Wi-Fi was everywhere. And then the third zone, very technology dependent space. And then the fourth zone, heads down, single occupant, sound attenuated space that allowed for these 8 to 9 attorneys working in the context of this space to accommodate the different activities and settings throughout the course of his or her day. We studied both the demising between these zones with traditional furniture forms, as well as with partition systems that retracted out of the ceiling plane that allowed for the ability to be flexible. The cost associated with the retractable electronic partitions was prohibitive, and they decided to go with furniture forms versus traditional demising. What's also important to know is they found well before COVID, 30% of their attorneys were not coming into the office 30 to 40% of the time. So between A, that factor, B, not banking space for growth, C, accommodating a hybrid model, all three components were coming together in the context of striking this solution to accommodate. Yet at any given time, if an attorney wanted a traditional office for a half a day, a week, that too was offered as part of this model. Next slide. Our time is dwindling away, and I'm going to be quick with some of these to allow for Q&A as well as a brief discussion on the questionnaire and survey responses. I wanted to share this particular model, which will occupy in another 8 weeks in one of the newest office buildings in downtown Chicago, known as Bank of America Tower. The reason I'm sharing this particular case study with you is construction started about 35% into the year of 2020. And the director of capital projects approached my team and said, Marty, what if I told you that we were growing at a faster rate than what we told you we were needing at the onset of the project? And I said, they said, what would you do differently as we're 20% into construction to address that concern? And I said, nothing. They said, we were hoping you would render that response. Now give us your rationale as to why. I said, the way we have designed your footprint to not only accommodate great flexibility, but we've designed your footprint to accommodate the ability for more than one attorney to occupy this a particular office, not at the same exact time, but within certain times within the context of a traditional week or business month. And we've designed the furniture in such a way that two people willing to embrace this approach could easily occupy without the need to remove and replace their personal effects, as long as the two people were compatible. And I shared with them how we designed the furniture in each one of these offices to make that accommodation. They were so comfortable with why it was unnecessary, given the rate of growth that they were experiencing at a much faster rate than they anticipated. They were so comfortable with how we designed the space that they will be resorting to, should it be necessary in the first 24 months of occupancy, they will be resorting to a shared select model that will accommodate not only the unforeseen growth, but the issue of a hybrid approach to occupancy. And that's why I wanted to share this particular case study specifically. Lastly, we do believe that the miss, as I referenced in our first 5 minutes, in a workplace environment is truly rooted in the social aspects, the reinforcing of the culture of a workplace and bringing people together. It's the whole existence of a culture. So I wanted to share this particular project, Reinhard Borner Van Duren in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in which the Milwaukee Business Journal, within the past 12 months, gave this project an honor of coolest office. It was a grossly underutilized law library on the south portion of the plan specifically, in which the building delivered to the tenant 25-foot high ceiling heights, in which many, many years ago, the library was placed. Next slide, please, Jason. The views to Lake Michigan and the views to downtown Milwaukee are breathtaking, but had, if you can picture, 9 high stacks of a very dense nature for the library's collection. Because of the underutilization, because of the strong sense of culture and community within this firm, and because of a story I shared with the team, the LIC team, Kim and such, beforehand, a phenomenon that we discovered during the programming process of how many people within this firm were taking advantage of a Starbucks across the street in the course of their daily work life. And I explained to the managing partner that we needed to create our own Starbucks, our own culture rooted in technology, and a seriously alternative choice to getting work done, incorporating Wi-Fi into this space and food service, and use it as a space to not only create a sense of relief for your staff, but a place to engage with the business community and your clients. And this space was restruck. Next slide. It offered a whole variety of entertainment spaces, even gaming areas, as evidenced here, in the context of this footprint. The utilization they occupied in August of 2020, the utilization of this space as 25% return to the office, now at 50%, and soon to be a 75% return. The utilization rate is at an all-time high. Billability is rising. Why? The firm made a decision to accommodate a grab and go with healthier and better food service offerings than ever had before. Next slide, please, Jason. In healthier choices and options, with a modest degree of support by the firm. And they are in not a remote portion of downtown Milwaukee, but where one has to walk a few blocks to get to a high concentration of decent restaurants. And especially during the inclement winter months, how the offerings of better coffee, various and sundry beverages and waters, healthier food options have created a new energy and new spirit within the context of, again, what we believe as a firm brings people back to an office after realizing success of remote working, reinforcing the culture of the firm. Are there any questions or comments about any of which we've shared with you today? I would, and Jason would welcome your input.
Marty, this is Kim Doherty. We did have one question that someone submitted in the chat. Her comment was, I found that attorneys prefer to meet in the conference rooms rather than collaborative spaces. Do people use these types of spaces?
That is an excellent, excellent question.
Yes, it is.
And it's a fair
And
question.
I find that 4 lounge chairs at the end of a circulation corridor in a law firm does not scream, come use me. I had a lengthy conversation with Kim Doherty about this yesterday. Attorneys collaborate, just like technology firms collaborate, just like Amazon corporate offices collaborate and Google. Attorneys collaborate differently. It's in the context of client service and their delivery, their ability, and how they support client need. I agree that contained space is how attorneys collaborate. If your question about conference rooms versus collaborative spaces is what you are asking, we are still finding that contained space, and with any and sundry and various degrees of transparency of that contained space and the right technology, is highly utilized. It's the open collaboration spaces that are not well received and not utilized. I have quite a perspective as to why that's the case. It's perceived as one is lounging. And in the context of that important billable hour, no one wants to be perceived as lounging unless you're in a setting dedicated to that kind of environment, like the top of the building law firm space in the previous series of slides. But even then, what this firm is finding is people are still being billable. So it's a great question. We've learned a little bit the hard way about the underutilization and devaluation of open collaborative spaces in a legal environment.
And to add to that, furniture solutions will also help dictate some of that behavior. You can still have a space that functions as a conference room without your traditional conference table and chairs. There's lounge settings, but because of it being in more of a closed environment, still allows the user to have that sense of privacy, sense of accomplishing a task without feeling the exposure of sitting kind of out in the open. And just by changing that furniture solution, it really allows for a different type of work style, but allows people to be productive and not feel that they are kind of in a fishbowl. Because I think a lot of open collaboration tends to steer people away because of that exposure feel.
I just wanted to close, if there aren't any further questions, with a comment made as to an earlier slide as to why such an approach may fail. And I referenced the need for a very balanced approach. And that balanced approach was had with a number of qualifying definitions of balance, if you will. I do believe that it's not just the ability in a hybrid model to reduce the cost of occupancy. I believe, and our team believes strongly, that that is one benefit, but the other benefit is the accommodation of the human factor and how people's comfort in returning to the office must be realized. The technology infrastructure and what it is that truly will bring people back to an office environment, which is critical to any culture. What we're seeing so far in 14 months of experience post-COVID is 15 to 30%, in one case, almost 40% reductions in overall square footage by embracing a hybrid model. Any other questions or comments?
So we all want to know, because I think this is a great question to follow up on the Milwaukee space that was converted from the library to the collaboration area. What happened to the books?
The
Y'all know
books,
Chinese like books.
first of all, the books went to where the efficiency of access to those books makes the most amount of sense, Kim, within 25 feet of where the attorneys are practicing, but had with much lesser need for the quantity of books. Reporters,
Right.
there are certain treatises, certain perspectives, certain supplements that are mission critical, depending on the nature of the practice, to be had within amazingly close proximity. In the case of tax attorneys, most of tax attorneys have their own collection in their own personal offices, but they went within the circulation corridors
Mhm.
of the a circulation corridor in a legal environment is a necessary evil. You have to get to the attorney offices within the context of that corridor. In that corridor, you populate less physical files because of the diminishing need, and more things that are critical to the attorney's access. The redistributed collection in a more pointed approach.
I'll go ahead and add one more. Maybe this is the final. This came from Philip Moran. I think it's a really good question. Marty and Jason, if a firm is entering into a 10 to 15-year lease in the next 2 to 3 years, the well-designed firm will have A, B, C, and D. What's the 4 things that a well-designed firm should have?
That is a really thoughtful question.
Yeah,
Jason, do you want to start or should I?
sure. I think building in that flexibility is going to be key to the longevity of that lease. I think planning on a, let's say, single size office module will not only allow you to densify a floor plate, but also give you the flexibility should people need to move. And if you don't need to place an attorney in every office, then those spaces could then become huddle rooms or collaboration spaces. But as soon as you start to see that growth tick back up, then you're able to utilize that space as an office without changing the physical parameters of any one space. So I think flexibility is going to be really important to that.
In addition to the flexibility Jason spoke to, and don't forget, at least from our practice's definition of flexibility, it's the ability to recreate the space over the lease term with minimal capital investment. And that is most doable. It's had with not only evaluating and designing to day 1 occupancy, but the anticipation of day 2, 3, and 4. And with the right infrastructure, you can accommodate with minimal capital investment the ability to modify the space over time. The second major component, in addition to flexibility from our perspective, is ubiquitous technology capabilities throughout the space and throughout every component of the space. The third is making sure that the accommodation of the human factor is had in the most thoughtful fashion and rationale as possible. And that's in the spirit of accommodating people in various degrees of inclusivity and diversity, people within a spectrum. And by the way, there are many people within the spectrum. The ability to accommodate how people work, the ability to accommodate the introvert as significantly as the extrovert. And in our opinion, that is had in choices and options within the context of the workplace solution. So the last one I think might be needed to be seriously considered is how are you accommodating the business community in which you are practicing and the community at large? And how are you addressing that based upon how your members, your partners, your future partners are connected to the various and sundry communities in which you're practicing? What are you doing in the expression and the design of the workplace to accommodate not only your own people, but that which your own people support and celebrate? Those are the four components that we believe are critical to your next workplace environment.
I will just add on that. Marty hit on the neurodiversity spectrum. 1 in 8 people are on some level of the spectrum, and we're taking notice of that. So building in spaces, being mindful of the physical attributes that we built into spaces, such as intensity of lighting, sound attenuation. Those are all things that will help address us being equitable about space and how we accommodate for as many people as possible. Just an example of that would be indirect lighting. And I think many of us have a lot of that within our spaces, but lowering the lumen output of that might help people who suffer from migraine or light sensitivity, still giving you the ability to have a functional workspace, but being mindful of that level of intensity of light for some people might be very hard, which then impacts that productivity. So being mindful of those smaller components are going to be critical to moving forward, and it gives flexibility to that space in the longevity of any lease.
So I know we're coming close to our time and we're slightly over, but if you guys had just a few minutes, we were wondering if you could share with us your thoughts and comments regarding the survey questions that our members completed and we sent to you guys. Want to know what did you feel or think during that period after seeing these results?
Actually, there was some really good feedback on that. Give me 1 second and I'll share that. Is this visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right. So thank you for those who participated in the survey. we'll run through these quickly so that we can be mindful of your time. But I actually got some really good feedback and some interesting findings from this. So on our question number one, do you anticipate attorneys, becoming more remote? And I mean, we got a good large swing here from 25 to 50%. And, as mentioned in the presentation earlier by Marty, in 2017, we only saw about 62% of people saying that they feel that people are going to start becoming more remote. And that jumped to, 96%. So that's kind of keeping in tune to what you guys are also seeing, this being from a national survey. Is your firm organization considering a reevaluation of its work from home policies? And yes, a large percentage of respondents said we're under that evaluation or we're making really big changes. In our personal workplace surveys, 61% of people said they want to have some sense of flexibility post-COVID. And I think that's going to be key to, refining some of these policies that will enable that and really become, how we keep moving forward in workplace. How has working from home impacted productivity? This was a good question that I think many people at the onset of COVID probably had big fears of. But if anything, I think this whole situation has really sparked confidence in being able to be more mobile, a little more detached. So there's actually some sense of increased productivity, or they have maintained the same sense of productivity. And a lot of that is going to be through policy, but technology, being able to still be productive in what you do and how you do it via your tools is going to be pivotal to that. So it was encouraging to see that. Is your firm or organization considering reductions in space or reallocating space in anticipation of fewer attorneys returning? I would say this was a good swing here. The national average per the Bright Insights survey is about 64% of firms plan to make real estate changes to 11 to 40% of their overall spaces. And it sounds like through this survey, you guys are also anticipating some of these changes as well, and to varying degrees, up to 50%, maybe 16%, under that, almost 60%. So that's significant changes, and I think that's really perceptive in terms of how can we make better efficiencies, how do we better utilize what we have now, and it doesn't always necessarily mean a reduction of your overall footprint. It could also be just reallocation of the box that we currently live in. In a pre-COVID world, on average, how often did you come into the office? And over 80% of people were in there daily. And for us on the design side of things, that would probably be a very measurable metric in the same vein of 80 plus for us being in the office. Then follow that up with, in a post-COVID world, what would be your preference for coming back in? And a huge toll of over 65% was saying, hey, if I could do 3 to 4 days a week, that would be ideal. And so we're talking about a 70% shift from, people wanting to come in daily versus a reduced schedule. And that's significant shift, which really kind of reinforces organizations to really reevaluate policy and the technology tools that will allow people to do this. If you can stay connected to your team and have the right technology and support working remotely, do you feel you will need a permanently assigned office in the future? I would say of all our respondents, the majority said yes, and some, quite a good amount, said no. And then it's complicated, and I think it's complicated probably because of well, what are my choices if I just have yes and no? Is there a happy median? And I would say, yes, there is a happy median. And by building in these spaces that allow people for flexibility, that kind of mitigates the, one extreme or the other. I think this kind of falls into the happy gray area where it still allows people to have choice in how they work and where they work. But if you compare that, so 40% said that they will need a permanent office. So that if you looked at attorneys and floor plate, let's say there were 60, you're talking about an average of maybe 24 offices being utilized on a regular. But if you compare that to the previous question, 11% of participants surveyed said they would be in their daily. That's going to now change to be 3 permanent offices on any one day being full. And then going to 67% of people who said that they'll be in there 3 to 4 days. Now we're only talking about 16 offices to have permanent residents on a regular basis. So now that really offsets how do I reallocate or reuse what I don't use on a daily basis. And so this allows for flexibility, it allows for mobility, and really gives you a lot of consideration in what you can do with your space. Please indicate the top 3 items that you feel your firm organization should consider a priority in the renovation of a new facility. I thought this was a great response with the overwhelming factor being towards air quality and thermal comfort. And I think part of that is because of a COVID world that we live in. But I also think that's really adding to how people feel within space, and the better people feel within space, the more productive, the more engaged they're going to be. The other big factor was access to natural daylight, and it's huge. I would say that most people don't realize their connectivity to that, and having that sense of daylight, whether you're an attorney on a perimeter window or administrative team on the interior, having that connection is going to be pivotal to the productivity of the day. And another big factor here was collaborative spaces, to which there's a lot of ways to tackle that, but it was good to see that that is a priority, because many people, assume that attorneys don't collaborate, which is not true. And then control of acoustics and sound, not only for the privacy aspect, but for concentration, being able to focus. I know personally that I like hearing some ambient noise when I'm doing certain tasks, but in order for me to accomplish focused things, I really need a lot of quiet. So being able to offer places that allow me to do that is pivotal to me being successful. So, we made the statement earlier that 1 in 8 people are on some level of the neural spectrum. So in any one floor plate of people, we're looking at 8 to 12 people within any one office or any one floor. And that's a big number. And that's something that we are finding to be more of a critical component for people to be mindful of when they're designing spaces, because we don't know who those people are, but we know that they are within our offices. So being able to accommodate certain attributes to the overall physical space and how that performs really helps be equitable to all. And I believe this is our last question. What percentage do you think the firm organization should incorporate towards health and mental well-being? And I mean, it was a pretty strong, up to almost 50% of a space should be mindful of this. So you guys are seeing that, you guys are taking note of how that would impact on any one person. And we're certainly seeing that from information that we're receiving from clients, as well as our research in how people react to space.
We are 3 or 4 minutes over our allotted time. I do hope that everyone found this a valuable discussion, and I want to thank you again for the opportunity and privilege to share our thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you, Jason. We appreciate this. It's just a reminder to everyone that we will post on ifmalic.org website, as well as the YouTube channel, the presentation and the handouts, and as well as the survey results. We'll share those with all of our members as well if you weren't able to attend and just want to see those specifically. Thank you again. I appreciate it. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
afternoon.
Thank you, guys.